establishing reform in this country's past. Abolitionists forced Americans to come to grips with the contradiction that would not go away. The existence of slavery in the land of the free.
One of the distinctive features of the American experience, slavery had firmly been established a century before the Declaration of Independence. Its supporters had come to feel that slavery was a normal relationship between black and white. Increasingly concentrated in the South after the Revolutionary War, slaveholders tried to maintain a dying institution. They bitterly resented the mounting Yankee attack, and like nobody's business ever had before, abolitionists agitated irritated the hostilities between the North and the South, leading proudly to the 19th century's biggest and most significant war, the American Civil War.
Excuse me, Mr. Douglas. I'm the guy in this museum, and I would appreciate you letting me do my job. Slavery was the fight of the abolitionists. Many of the movement's leaders were former slaves, men and women who brought lives that harsh and cruel to slavery. And they did not hold back, describing slavery for a horrific impact on their souls. No matter how well a slave was treated, to be owned like property, diminished the human dignity of all involved.
Talk.
And those of you who don't feel any connection to your ancestors, those of you who don't assume any responsibility for the actions of your great-grandparents, you are the ones who need to stop and think on how your children's children and their children will regard your lives. A couple hundred years from now, the citizens will wonder why you voted or did not vote for certain candidates. They will wonder a lot about who you are and what you stood for, because you are forever connected by blood and spirit. You have a responsibility to acknowledge their actions, to examine your own, understanding that what we do matters. 100 years from now, your descendants will regard your moment in history and will either be ashamed or proud of who you are. There's no way to deny the importance of this in each of our own individual lives. Talk! Mr. John Brown was a man of action. We will soon get to his story. But first, I would like to introduce each of our guests. Mr. Nat Turner, how do you plead?
Not guilty.
What of the men, women, and children who died by your command?
I had a vision. I saw black spirits and white spirits engaged in battle. The sun dawned. Thunder rolled through the heavens, and the blood flowed in the streams. Seek ye the kingdom of heaven, and all things shall be added unto you.
Mr. Turner, Miss Dublin were generals in the war. Mr. Douglas wore a face.
And Mr. Lincoln clears me, Mr. Brown. Introducing folks is my job.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is James Walker. And in 1829, about a year before Mr. Turner's rebellion, I wrote a 76-page pamphlet, generally known as David Walker's Appeal.
Our Uncle Tom Stabbin. Do you know who I am?
Oh, welcome everybody to What's My Line, Congress of the 19th century.
Now, ladies, you must start your introductions, or I fear we will not complete our assigned task.
Oh, we will complete our task, Mr. Douglas. The museum creators brought this in, and we must take a vote and decide whether or not to burn it.
Mr. This flag is a symbol of our past that cannot be denied. Surely we can find other ways to voice our dissatisfaction to not greet such childish behavior.
Talk!
Now, I didn't let you win the war until you did the right thing. I ain't here today with this flag.
Miss Tubman, the Union must be saved.
It is important to acknowledge what we propose by burning this.
Mr. Tubman, you've already decided what you're voting. It is to burn this flag.
To burn this flag is sure to inflame the hearts of those who hold that cause near and dear to their hearts.
Talk! Narrator, will you do your job?
Sir,
Colonization Society was formed in 1830. Up until 1830, colonization was discussed among white abolitionists as a possible solution to slavery.
Negroes were never in love with the idea of going back to Africa. As early as 1817, opposition to colonization was formally rejected.
Thank you, madam. But please do not interrupt.
Now, read a bit more with this.
Colonization was a hot topic and can be likened to the motions created for us in the late 20th century with affirmative action. In a direct challenge to the "Take Them Back to Africa" movement came a disquieting document, which bore a lengthy title, David Walker's Appeal to the Colored Citizens of the World, but in particular, those of the United States of America.
It was generally shortened to David Walker's Appeal.
Itself called Arthur was a dealer in clothes, new lanes second hand. He left Wilmington, North Carolina, to settle in Boston. History now regards David Walker as the Malcolm X of the 1830s.
Remember, Americans, that we must and shall be free. And will you wait until we shall under God obtain our liberty by the crushing arm of power? Will it not be dreadful to you? I speak, Americans, for your own good.
David Walker's Appeal ran to 3 editions in 1829 and 1830. It was a call to militant action and it frightened white America badly. Laws were passed, making it a criminal offense to distribute this pamphlet.
Why do the slave holders or tyrants of America fight so hard to keep my brethren from reading or receiving my book of appeal to them? Is it because they treat us so well? Is it because we are satisfied to rest in slavery to them and their children? Is it because they treat us like men by compensating us all over this free country for our labor?
David Walker asked the question, well, why are the Americans so fearfully terrified respecting my book? Why do they search vessels when entering the harbors of tyrannical states? Is it to see if any of my books can be found, for fear that my brethren will give them to read?
Why? I thought Americans proclaim to the world that they are happy, enlightened, humane, and Christian people. All of the inhabitants of this country enjoy equal rights.
Mr. Brown, please, let me do my job. David Walker was a brilliant man. He full well understood the magnitude of his appeal. He used words as an act of militancy, and he was calling to arms his fellow Negroes. Listen to what he says in the pamphlet's preamble.
We know what the pamphlet says. What we need to discuss right now is this flag.
We'll get to that, Miss Drew. Just hold on.
In the preamble I write, I am fully aware in making my appeal to my much afflicted and suffering brothers that I shall not only be assailed by those whose greatest earthly desires are to keep us in wretched ignorance and abject ignorance, and who are of the firm conviction that heaven has designed us and our children to be slaves and beasts of burden to them and their children.
Mr. Walker continues. I said, I do not only expect to be held up to the public as an ignorant, impudent, and restless disturber of the public peace by such greedy creatures, as well as a move of insubordination, and perhaps put in prison or to death for giving a superficial exposition of our misery, and for exposing tyrants.
David Walker asked the question, can our condition be any worse? Can it be more mean and abject? If there are changes made, will they not be for the better, though we may appear for the worse at first? Can they get us in order? Where can they get us? They're afraid to treat us any worse, for they know well on the day they do it, they're gone.
Excuse me, Mr. Douglas.
But against all accusations which may or can be preferred against me, I appeal to heaven for my motive and right, who knows that my object is, if possible, to awaken in the breast of my afflicted, degraded, and slumbering brethren a spirit of inquiry and investigation respecting our miseries and wretchedness in this Republican land of liberty.
save us, we pray thee, thou God of heaven and of earth, from the devouring hand of the white Christian. O thou Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. Enthroned thou art in heaven above, surrounded by angels there.
We know, we chariot, coming forward to carry me home.
Black as the night, and its bows, she slipped across the Mason-Dixon line and headed for a rendezvous point in the old slave south. With revolver cocked, she moved silently across the fields and through the forest, moving from tree to tree and from ditch to ditch. From time to time, she froze in her tracks, forewarned by a personal radar that never failed. A broken twig, a neigh of a horse, a cough, a sneeze, all singing. And so she halted, listening, waiting, her body kissed for attack. She was a gentlewoman, but she was black and could ill afford sentimentality. There was a price on her head, some $40,000, and a slight mistake would mean death. Fortunately, this small woman was without nerves, and she had no equal, male or female, in her chosen trade, organizing and managing slave estates.
That's all well and good. But what do we want to do about the flag?
Harriet Tubman liked to materialize in the open, wrap her coat on a chosen door of the slave quarters, or stand deep in the woods singing, for a tantalizing moment, a few bars of the spiritual code.
I'll meet you in the morning, deep in the promised land, on the other side of Jordan, bound for the promised land.
Waiting years upon hearing the coded messages, perked up and word racing through the caverns of the initiated. Moses is here.
Moses is here. Moses is here.
After certain preparations, the woman, as she was called, led a group of slaves through the slave-holding South and delivered her people to the promised land of Canada. 19 times she made exchanges for this round trip. 19 times she baited the collective might of the slave power, and 19 times she won.
I was born a slave, and I lived a life of a slave. I was born in 1820 or 1821 in Bucktown near Cambridge on the eastern shore, one of 11 children of Harriet Green and Benjamin Hall. As a child, I was called both Harriet and Harriet, but I was never a child. By the age of 5, I was working full-time, cleaning white folks' houses by day and tending their babies. If I felt it, I was hit mercilessly. I grew up like a neglected weed, ignorant of liberty and having no experience of it. I was neither happy nor happy. Every time I saw a white man, I was afraid of being carried away.
Talk, talk, talk.
John Brown, and you know me, and you know I'm not just a woman to talk. Right now it's my moment, and I will do with it what I please.
My apologies, ma'am.
I had 2 sisters carried away on the chain gang. One of them left behind 2 children. We were always uneasy. I believe slavery is the next thing to hell. If a person would enslave another, I believe he would be bad enough to send him to hell if he could.
Harriet was, to all accounts, the despair of the overseers who could not break her rebellious will. On one occasion, a male slave decided to go into town. The slave was followed by an overseer, who was closely followed by Harriet. The overseer cornered the man in the store and called on Harriet for aid. Only 13. Harriet ignored the order and went to the aid of the black man. When the man dashed through the door, Harriet stepped between him and the overseer. Enraged, the overseer picked up a rock and flung it at the escaping man. The rock tore a hole in Harriet's skull. For weeks she hovered between life and death. Then slowly, she began to recover. It was later discovered that the blow had pushed a portion of Harriet's brain against her skull. Ever afterwards, she suffered from what's called a stupor, or sleeping sickness. 4 or 5 times a day, she would suddenly fall asleep. After a short spell, she would regain consciousness and continue the conversation or her work at that precise moment where she left off.
During my evening convalescence, I developed a deep and intensely personal religious faith. I'd always been a dreamy and indrawn child, and now I gave myself wholly to God, praying without ceasing. I started having dreams of a line across which there was freedom and human dignity. Upon learning that my master was preparing to kill me, I decided to quit. I tried to persuade my brother to accompany me, but they
So she set out in the summer of 1849. Traveling at night until she reached Philadelphia. She decided that there was one of 2 things she had the right to: liberty or death.
If I could not have one, then I would have the other, but no man would take me alive.
On her first day in freedom, Harriet looked at her hand to see if she was the same person now that she was free. There was such a glory over everything. The sun came like gold through the trees and over the fields, but there was a shadow of Harriet's. She perceived with starting clarity that she could never be free until her people were free. So resolving, Harriet Tubman and dedicated herself to work unceasingly for the complete emancipation of her people.
Between trips, I accumulated money by working as a cook, maid, or laborer. Because I could neither read nor write, I implored Northern Confederates to write coded letters to free Negroes for sympathetic rights. Once a slave party was contacted, I began to collect the fugitive. A revolver, and fresh ammunition, fake passes for slaves of varying descriptions, and paregoric to drug babies.
General Tubman was very strict about time. She wavered no one, not even her brother who was delayed on a trip by the imminent arrival of a new baby. Was a slave committed to a coming escape. It was freedom or death. On several occasions, slaves collapsed and said they were tired, sick, scared.
You go or you die here, dead nigga, tell me.
Harriet Tubman provided me with much useful information about secret highways and the like. I was one of David Walker's early supporters. Gave money to support his pamphlet. Those 2 understood.
Mr. Brown, I was just about to introduce you.
In the first place, I deny everything, save what I've always admitted, the use of force to free the slaves. But I have an objection. It is unjust that I should suffer this penalty. And I acted on behalf of the rich, the powerful, the famous, and I acted on behalf of their family and friends, and I suffered the sacrifices I have on behalf of any of that class of people, all in this courtroom would have approved, not condemned.
Surely, Mr. Brown, you do not believe those words that you just said.
I suppose that this court acknowledges the rule of the law of God. I have here the Bible. The Bible teaches that whatsoever men shall do unto me, I shall do unto them. The Bible also teaches, remember they that are in bonds, as is bound with them. I merely followed these instructions. What I did was not wrong, but right.
Seeking social change by unauthorized force leads to anarchy, Mr. Brown.
I say to you, Mr. Lincoln, if I must die to end injustice, if I must mingle my blood with the blood of my children, if I must mingle my blood with that of millions crushed by cruel, wicked, and unjust laws, then so be it. Let it be done, and I shall die.
Mrs. Brown, I marvel at how much you love the spoken word. And then you're always so quick to accuse the rest of us of too much talk.
It's only the narrator who talks too much in this museum. We need to get on with this black business right now.
Yes, narrator, you've lost control of these proceedings.
With John and 21 men, 5 blacks and 16 whites, John Brown invaded the state of Virginia, captured the town of Harper's Ferry, and seized the U.S. arsenal and freed some 50 slaves.
2 days, August of 1859, I pleaded with Mr. Douglas to join me at Harper's Ferry.
Some said he was mad. Some said he was a fool. But some said he was a saint.
A misguided fanatic.
John Brown was the most of a man naturally I ever met.
More than any other white man in America's history, John Brown was consumed, literally consumed, by the idea of black liberation. Even the great Frederick Douglass admitted.
John Brown's zeal in the cause of freedom was infinitely superior to mine. Mine was a taper light. His was the blazing sun. Mine was bound by time. His stretched away to the silent shores of eternity.
I, John Brown, am now convinced the crimes of this guilty nation will never be purged save with much bloodshed. I had, as I now think, vainly flattered myself that only a little bloodshed might do.
John Brown proved to be an accurate prophet. Within 2 years, Union troops were marching through the heart of the South singing, John Brown's body lies a moldering in the grave. But his showboats marching on.
John Brown was one of many sparks to ignite the Civil War. Our book is something you may have heard of, Uncle Tom's Cabin. President Lincoln, upon meeting him, agreed.
Well, little lady, you're the one who started this big war.
Uncle Tom's Cabin. Awaken the consciousness of a nation. America will sleep no longer.
Abraham Lincoln hasn't done nothing for the colored folks, and he won't be able to win the war until he does something.
December 2nd, 1859. John Brown stepped from the jail on the last morning of his life into a street full of soldiers. As Brown was led to the gallows, an elderly slave woman shouted,
Oh, bless you, old man. If I could help you, I would. The greatest friend of the Negro is John Brown.
But I am known as the great emancipator. Is that not right now?
John Brown took up arms to end slavery, like George Washington took up arms to guide new nations in his struggle against English oppression. They were both generals in wars. Almost 30 years before John Brown, Nat Turner was another general who also took up arms in the war against slavery. John Brown's hanging came 29 years after Nat Turner's hanging and beheading. But killing these two men, these two generals did not stop their side from winning a war that took over 300 years to finally end. But it did, because of the actions of men and women who reside in this abolitionist museum.
No man or woman is free until all are free. No man or woman is free until all are free. No man or woman is free until all are free. No man or woman is free until all are free.
John Brown, one of the most famous abolitionists in the 1800s. Every Negro, without exception, admired John Brown's willingness to die for his beliefs, which were based on the simple truth that enslavement of any human being by another was morally wrong.
Amen to that.
But despite John Brown's popularity back in the 1800s, in today's mind, the most famous abolitionist of the 1800s was Frederick Douglass. Mr. Douglass was the Dr. Martin Luther King of the 1800s.
I spent 2 days in August of 1859 pleading with Mr. Douglas to join me at Harper's Ferry.
One has to be prepared to meet God at the end of the road. That is fight then, Schmidt.
I believe freedom must be demanded. But there are ways to make a demand, with some ways being more effective than others.
Well said, Mr. Douglas.
Write it down.
Words can be worthy weapons.
The flame that is flying is a good weapon.
Mr. Brown, I think you're right. It's time to stop all this talk and commit to something. Are you with us, Mr. Turner?
Once the sign is received, action must be taken.
Nat Turner was a man of God. Like Jesus, he traveled from place to place. Or in Nat Turner's case, from plantation to plantation, to preach to the oppressed and enslaved.
President Lincoln, you joked that it was my book that started the Civil War. But we both know that it was Mr. Turner's revolt in 1831 that signaled the ultimate end of slavery.
Both my parents were pure-blood Africans. It was said that I was marked with a sign that I must do God's work. At the age of 4, I opened the New Testament and read. I had taught myself to write. I had taught myself. My family could not leave. They were not allowed. It was against the law for whites, if they were so inclined, to teach Africans to read or write.
Nat Turner, perhaps more than any other figure in this museum, was much maligned by history's telling of his story.
He struck a blow against slavery and crippled the beast. Mr. Walker, I have heard of your book of appeal, but it is not available anywhere in Southampton County.
Brother Turner, it was a call to arms, and you answered the mighty force of that.
Mr. Turner's revolt was carried out as one who was performing a mission for God. From an early age, he was a dream and enthralled child, giving to seeing visions and hearing voices from the heavens.
That's how it worked with me as a child.
Myself as well.
And as you listen to the details of the lives of these abolitionists, you will notice many similarities in the backgrounds and beliefs.
The narrator, you told everyone's story except mine.
You haven't said much about me, but that's all right. My name is Joyner Cruz, and as long as I'm in my God's life, all is well.
Except for my book, how much has been said about me. I write more than just Uncle Tom's Cabin.
Not much is said about me on these programs, but everybody already knows everything they need to know about Honest Dave.
I am prepared to introduce each and every one of you. Just give me time. Mr. Douglas, everyone knows that you are one of the greatest voices of the 19th century. You were born in slavery, bred away from your master, and quickly went on to bigger and better things.
If you don't mind, narrator, I'll tell my own story.
Oh, be my guest.
I appeared before this immense assembly this evening as a thief and a robber. I stole this head, these limbs, this body from my master and ran off.
Well said, Mr. Douglas. Well said.
Thank you, Mrs. Stowe. My book, Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, is the real life account of what you fictionalized in Uncle Tom's Cabin.
Uncle Tom's Cabin. It sold over 100,000 copies. In today's world, it would be like on the New York Times bestseller list for 4 years.
It started a war.
Pardon, Mr. Lincoln, but you need to take your head out of the sand. If you actually thought that you could save the Union without freeing a single slave, then you were deeply misguided.
Misguided me.
Abraham Lincoln was America's 16th president and one of his greatest. He rose above personal reservations and did the morally correct and logical thing by signing several drafts of the Emancipation Proclamation.
And even the final draft issued on January 1st, 1863, didn't sound like you knew.
Ah, Abraham. What a disappointment that first reading was on January 1st, 1863. It came over the telegraph to Boston. We began reading with much excitement. But that soon died. as we realize how little it said.
Mr. Walker, I take exception to that comment. You weren't even alive at that time.
You hold the document in your hand, and I have read it. Harriet Beecher Stowe and I are the type of writers who use words as our weapons in a battle. Your words don't carry that necessary action.
On November 19, 1863, President Lincoln stood at Gettysburg to the dedication of a national cemetery. In a few brief remarks, he summed up a nation's pain and hope for the future.
407 years ago, our fathers brought forth this continent, a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we're engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation is conceived and dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war.
President Lincoln continued, "We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as the final resting place to those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this."
But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot shallow this ground for the brave men, living and dead, who struggled here, have consecrated it far beyond our core powers to do the consecration of this ground.
The world will note or long remember what we say here, but they will never forget what these soldiers did here.
It is for us, rather, to be dedicated to the unfinished task which those who died here have thus so far nowhere advanced.
It is rather for us to be here, dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave their last full measure of devotion.
That we were highly resolved that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that the government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
God bless America. It's time to take a vote.
Burn! It is a sign!
It will signal the others.
No more talk, talk, talk! Burn, baby, burn!
No! We must consider this more carefully.
Absolutely. If we are to restore harmony in this museum, then not burning this flag is what we must do.
Let us pray.
David Walker, Nat Turner, Sister Harriet Tubman, and John Brown are for burning. Sister Stowe, Mr. Lincoln, Mr. Douglas, say no. If I vote, it could be a 4-4 tie, or it could be a 5-3 for burn. What would you do in a tiebreaker, narrator?
What is it to be this truth?
My dear sister soldier, that's my God. She knows what we must do.
Yes, Sister Harriet, you are correct. I do know what to do. My vote is...
Wait, I've been told the audience anything about you. They don't really know who you are, do they?
Tell
Life has passed her by. She was alone, utterly alone, in the big city of New York. She was without resources or friends. Her family was disorganized. Her marriage shattered. Her name was in disgrace. All was lost. Or, so it seemed to Isabella Van Wagner, as she looked back on her life the spring of 1843.
I have always talked to God, like one human being talking to another. One day, while in my bedroom, in the house, of the family I work for, suddenly from the walls, from the ceiling, from the very air, came an answer.
Isabella Van Wagner. You are not really Isabella Van Wagner. There's another person within you. So on June 1st, 1843, Isabella Van Wagner went to her employer, Miss Whiting, and told her,
"My name is Sojourner Truth. God made me Sojourner, for I am to travel up and down the lands, saving others from their sins, and being a sign unto them."
Sojourner Truth was the first black woman to become a public speaker in the abolitionist movement.
Oh, to burn. We not to burn. What to do? What to do?
Actually, I was going to tell them about the time you showed your breast in public.
Good dear is always in good taste.
You challenged me mightily, Miss Drew.
One night she asked me a very difficult question.
Frederick, is God dead?
Of course not. How could one think such a thing?
What would Harriet Beecher Stowe feel about how Uncle Tom has evolved into an incel breaking only behind nigger as an utterance sure to provoke emotions on both sides?
Uncle Tom was a good man, a strong man.
The time for action is upon us. God lives, but he is angry.
The Union must be saved.
It's too late. If God didn't let you win the war, I think you did the right thing.
We must burn this flag.
No.
If you're voted as flat for burning and for against burning the area, we must live by the rules when those rules are fair.
We must be careful in where we choose our battles. This is what I communicated to John Brown in the weeks before Harper's Ferry.
Harper's Ferry was a necessary action.
In order to preserve the harmony of this museum with 8 of us preside, we must always adhere to the majority rule system.
Are you changing your vote with the leader?
Absolutely not, Miss Tubman. But I am letting you vote as you see fit.
Getting better, but you still got a long way to go.
Listen, everyone, my vote supersedes all of yours.
I saw a sign.
Well, you can put your thumb up, stick it out, and hitch a ride back to the dismal swamp. Because we ain't having no flag burning today at this Temple Bethel gathering. You're famous. You have job security. Wherever there's an abolitionist museum, you'll definitely have a place in it. I don't have that type of job security. Calling the shots here. I say there will be no flag burning today. Oh, okay. Let's say goodbye, everybody.
My name is David Walker, and I urge each of you to go out and get a copy of my appeal and read it before America is consumed.
My name is Harriet Beecher Stowe, and I read Uncle Tom's Cabin to detail the horrors of slavery and to humanize what many felt to be inhumane.
My name is Nat Turner, and I was a general that led the army in the first successful slave rebellion.
My name is Harriet Tubman, and I too was a general in the army that moved people from slavery into freedom.
My name is John Brown, and I too was a general. Slavery is not just a black problem. Slavery is a white problem.
My name is Abraham Lincoln, and slavery is a problem of humanity.
My name is Frederick Douglass, and we must find a way to heal our wounds and join hands.
My name is Sojourner Truth. God made me Sojourner because he helped me to understand that there is always a journey to truth, and truth will not be denied. Stay low and goodbye, my friends.
Talk.
How do we go about getting the narrator?
The sign has been given.
got them all.
I think I can project it, yeah, just thank you. And I think we need to thank Sherry Bailey once again for bringing this to life to the community. And what she's done in her play is bring to light examples of people who are willing to risk their necks for truth and justice, which helps us learn as well, I think, what by example is possible for us today. We know their names, but so often we really don't know their whole story. John Brown was, as Sherry has written in the entree to this play, a white man who stood alone, willing to die in the fight against slavery. But many of us were taught that John Brown was crazy. That happens to people who go against the president's viewpoint. Harriet Tubman, whatever personified